What an irksome little thing, that flickering light of yours. Hast thou considered joining the shadows? A warm and comfortable lodging, regardless of what it might seem. Thou art welcome here, lost traveller. Extinguish thy fire and join our home. The world of Vermis is dying. Low birth rates, civilizations in ruins, and gods being cursed and murdered. There is no hope for the future, just a desperate prayer that they can atone for the sins of the past. You've probably heard of them by now, but if not, then the Vermis books are a manual for a game series that doesn't exist, created by the artist Plastiboo. It's heavily inspired by games like Dark Souls, old dungeon crawlers, and TTRPGs. I highly recommend you check out these books, and the links are in the description. Vermis is dark, rich, and full of secrets, and the lore is difficult to piece together. My aim was to put it all together in one place, and start putting together some of the pieces of the puzzle. In a way, it's very similar to games like Dark Souls or Fear and Hunger. You may be given a large slate of information somewhere, but the context is completely changed by a line uttered in passing later. So please, come with me as we explore the world of Vermis, and ask yourself, whose flesh is your flesh? May Dorvus guide your way. There are 6 great gods, 6 remaining faiths from the old world. The old world is a source of secrets and mystery, often mentioned throughout the books. It's clear that it was the height of civilization, but now a distant memory of peace, prosperity, and glory. Old Ghylak, the ancient city, was the heart of the old world. While the rest of the world has faded, it has retained a sense of normalcy due to its location in the Great Desert. The shifting, searing sands have protected it from the myriad curses outside, although even its glory has faded too. Once it commanded the known world, but now its people hide away and foreigners are a rare sight. Ghylak, being the capital, is home to some of the classes a player can pick. The Ratman lived in its sewers, and the Stone Scholars hail from here too. We know of 6 gods now, but in the old world they worship ones that have since been forgotten. Surrounding Ghylak, littering the sands, are ruins from ancient civilizations that worship these gods. The bones of these sanctuaries appear and disappear from under the sands as they ebb and flow with the path of the undying sun. Much has been forgotten about the old world. The lore keepers of Num are dedicated to finding and preserving as much knowledge as possible. To aid them, they have a trinket named for the god of truth, the Eye of Dorvus. If one looks through it, they see text in their native tongue, which aids on their mission to gather and memorize knowledge for the future of humanity. Ironically, we know the least about Dorvus, the god of truth. Vermis is a world of illusions, so travellers seem to invoke Dorvus to help them on their way. One of my favourite details in the world building is the Vagrant's Crown. Stone markers with grim faces that have notched carvings around their heads. Travellers passing through tie hair or fabric around it, giving the appearance of a head of hair. A crown without any hair, then, is said to be an untrustworthy area. There are many untrustworthy locations we visit in the books, and many locations filled with dangerous illusions. The Silver Swamp is one such location, a low marsh at the base of the hills filled with pearly waters, weeping willows, and a silver, soporific mist. The result of witchcraft, people assume. It's a land of apparitions, shadows lurking just out of reach, visions of those who never returned from the swamp. Spending too long in the mist inevitably sends one to sleep, no matter how hard they fight it. Falling asleep here appears to lead to one just vanishing into the mist, but it's not quite so simple. They fall into a dream. The landscape changes. There's no longer any mist, and the sandy ground is replaced with a sea of corpses as far as the eye can see. The only way to escape this place and not join the countless dead is to defeat the Guardian, the aspect of the dream. Upon awakening, the mist is gone, and the waters are crystal clear. Another illusion shattered. But the mist in the swamp is more than just a simple witch's trick. Gurvek the Great was a god. A giant, he was a step below true divinity, but close enough for humans to consider him the same. He protected humanity from the Titans, but now we see his corpse laying in Greengrave next to the Silver Swamp. What could possibly kill a divine giant? For years he slept, atop mountains and deep valleys as beds, lullabied by the birds, tucked in by the silvery mist. Gurvek was trapped in sleep by the mists, eventually dying. The mist drifted down the landscape, ending up in the low swamps below the hills of Greengrave. His death wasn't natural or the result of a great battle, but of trickery. Even with the slumbering mists, it took many years to kill the giant. Unfortunately, the event is shrouded in deep history, so clues as to who would do this and why are yet unknown. In the shadow of the corpse of the giant is the Graveyard Valley, a quiet, secluded valley filled with the dead. Hidden underneath is the Pauper's Catacombs, a hole to dump the nameless, the disgraced, and the poor when they die. The dead are restless here. The god Gurvek is a reminder of a better time, a time of peace under his protection. The world of Vermis is one of bittersweet memories. The world was a better place, but has been in crumbling misery for generations. Many of the playable classes are driven by bittersweet memories of some kind. Some use these to hold on to hope, others despair. The infant seeker looking for her child, the lost old glory obsessed with the heights of his past, the minor knights seeking the secrets of the old world. One can learn from their past and try and better themselves, or refuse to do so and sink into depravity. The rat man has forgotten his human past and lives entirely as a rat. Likewise, the waste of life refuses to learn their lesson from numerous crimes. Old Agarit, the capital, is surrounded by the bones of memory, rising and sinking to remind them of all they've lost. The goblins are locked in place due to ancient oaths and bittersweet memories, and we'll discuss them soon. When Gurvek died, the area around him became known as Dead Man's Garden, or Greengrave. That forest is now sacred, and those who live there are said to live longer than normal. Even in death, Gurvek seeks to protect humanity through his sacred woods. But Gurvek isn't the god of the woods. That domain belongs to the third god, Murgo the Relentless, for he is the father of all that is green. Shrines to this god are found throughout the woods, with offerings of berries, seeds, and flesh. His followers are known as the Holy Seeds. They protect his holy terrain, and to prove their devotion, they commit great acts of violence against themselves to witness his healing miracles. At least one time, however, they failed to protect their sacred forest. The Voika forest was burnt to the ground. Only a single follower of Murgo's from that area, now called the Daughter of Ash, survived. She carries a seed that has the potential to grow into a mighty forest, a slim hope that the greatness of the past can be restored, an attempt to atone for past sins. Murgo's sacred ground deacons and priests can be found in the Flutewood, adjoining Greengrave and the Silver Swamp. Here, the forest is comprised of flutewood trees, which grow with strange holes through their trunks. The wind wails through these holes, filling the air with unnerving sounds. There's two civilizations here, one hidden in darkness and whispers, and the other in ruins. There was once a goblin kingdom, established by a cruel queen who fled to the woods after murdering her husband. She gave birth to two daughters, one beautiful, delicate, and kind, and the other a horrible, bloodthirsty monster. The monstrous child was locked in a well and fed the remains of goblins, but the other daughter grew up with a kind heart and was devoted to her wards. She led a rebellion against her cruel mother and established the Green Sun Kingdom, a haven for goblin kind. Sadly, she was stricken with a rare illness, and as her life faded, so did her kingdom. To protect her body, they built a mausoleum around the well her sister was trapped inside, so they could stay close together forevermore. Now, the kingdom lies in ruins. The only building close to standing is the mausoleum, protected by the last few remaining goblins. The goblins themselves are fearful, decrepit creatures, their vigour long since spent. There are still some threats lurking after the setting at the Green Sun, however. Skeletons, a necromancer, the goblin knight, and the bestial daughter of the queen, Hamlet's beast, still lurk the halls of the mausoleum. And another danger, a most curious kind, the light gobbler, a twisted kind of goblin. A light shines out of their mouths that sends anyone who looks into it insane. What this creature is and why it's here has some interesting implications. We'll return to the light gobbler soon. There is another group who inhabit the woods, one that is secretive and cruel, the witches. There's several kinds, such as the velvet witches, so named for their pale velvety skin, and the blind witches, the disembodied head of a witch that flies using its hair. They hex and chant curses to ensnare their prey, curses so strong they cannot be lifted, even if the witch herself dies. To the witches, a child is a delicacy, so the rare child that is born is often taken. Witches often make puppets out of bones, mud, or sticks to do their bidding, and they and their minions can be found all throughout the woods and nearby Graveyard Valley. There is another strange entity here, the Morning Nightlight. Appearing similar to a human nervous system, they float above bodies of water, making sounds like a crying woman. To understand them, the witches and the light gobbler, we need to talk about enlightenment. Marko, the oracle, is the old world god of prophecies. He shares this knowledge with his followers, but even he was eventually killed. Due to the crimes of the god Ghylak, he inflicted the eternal curse upon him, beheading the snake god. In return, Ghylak's followers enacted a holy war upon Marko, beheading the god of oracles and persecuting his faithful. After death, Marko's head spoke prophecies to those who knew how to listen, but eventually his head was defiled and few images of his likeness remain. The interesting thing is, Marko must have known that he would lose this war and have his influence fade. After he was beheaded, he predicted that the world would fall to rot and ruin. Perhaps Marko foresaw that Ghylak would be the cause of all this, and tried to kill him before he could do it, but didn't count on the snake god being half resurrected. After this, Ghylak's cult led their campaign of blood and terror. Could Marko's actions have caused this prophecy to become fulfilled? Right now, we don't know the true reason or scope of the eternal curse, so it remains to be seen. In Vermis, several themes revolve around the head and face, such as enlightenment. In the Sealed Lands, we see a clear example of this. Ancient eclipse towers dot the lush forest, their doors sealed since time immemorial. Inside, devotees attempt to reach enlightenment through the chanting of mantras. Success means being lulled into eternal slumber, chanting forever, until their heads split open and the light inside shines out to guide others on their path too. Although, the enlightenment brought about by this light appears to normal people as madness. Eventually, they become truly enlightened, and they become a being that appears similar to a nervous system. These beings emit constant high-pitched noises and can project images into people's minds. There's also the lucky few who are touched directly by the light and become a kind of floating head. These beings are remarkably similar to what we've seen of the witches. Floating, decapitated heads. A strange nervous system entity that cries out. Their taste for human flesh. I suspect the witches are descendants of one of these groups, one that failed to reach enlightenment and refused to abandon their earthly powers. This idea of a light that sends one mad is something we've seen previously too. The Light Gobbler from the Green Sun ruins. It is an entity that is nearly just a head, that emits a light that sends one mad. Perhaps the goblins had their own sages try to reach enlightenment in the dying days of their kingdom. Some of the player classes highlight this connection between the head and enlightenment too. The stone scholars have heavy stones tied to compress their faces, which grants them a great wisdom. In fact, a scholar who loses his stones is said to have lost his enlightenment. There's a kind of inverse enlightenment as well. The Merc sages conceal their heads in perfect darkness with their large helmets and hide in the shadows, using their powers to cast illusions. Instead of using the light to find the truth, they use the darkness to create lies. Indeed, there are failed Eclipse Tower acolytes, the abyssal devotees, who have failed on the path to enlightenment and given themselves over to the darkness. Their minds have fallen into madness, and they eat the flesh of their fellows to survive. Marko, already a god, did not gain or lose enlightenment through his decapitation, but Ghylak seemed to. It's not clear what the curse laid on Ghylak truly was, but I believe it was a removal of his divine status. The demon Ogol too was said to be a god in the past, before mankind decided to stop worshipping him. All demons were gods once. It is man who puts crowns on our heads and holds axes over our necks. When Marko put the axe to Ghylak's head, it was a war in heaven to throw a god down from their divine status. Marko's cult persisted despite his own decapitation, but eventually waned, being brought to the brink of extinction through persecution and the defilement of his remains. Ghylak was at risk of this too, when the eternal curse was laid upon him and his head removed, but his most faithful follower gave her own head to allow him to continue. But this self-sacrifice didn't truly remove the curse from Ghylak. Despite waging a holy war against Marko and his cult, despite granting Ghylak a new head, the curse remains. The bearer of the curse will suffer a fate worse than death, and probably will carry it as long as the blasphemer wishes, regardless of their lifespan. A punishment yet unworthy of thy sin, said Marko, before inflicting the eternal curse upon Ghylak. The followers of Ghylak still seek to cure this curse to this day. Worship of the snake god seems to be the most prominent faith that yet remains. There are two main branches that we know of, shown through character classes. The Wandering Angels are a kind of knight-errant, although they seek to reach Ghylak's sacred mountain. When they do, they pull the halo attached to their armour and decapitate themselves in honour of their god. Not much else is known about these knights, other than that they must be devoted indeed. The other known branch are the Bone Hunters, devotees who search for bones, particularly skulls, to offer to their cursed god. How they obtain these bones is up to them. Some kill innocents, some conduct mass slaughters, and others merely rob tombs and ancient ruins. Some even attack other servants of Ghylak at times. I believe that the story of the Wayfarer in the second book, Mist and Mirrors, offers a clue as to the curse. This is spoilers for the story, so skip to this timestamp to avoid. Throughout the book, the Wayfarer's appearance is changing and he doesn't know his own face. Because of his past sins, an incurable curse is creeping up his body and threatens to take his life. He fights many versions of himself, and the monstrous version of himself he fights at the end tries on many different faces to find the right one. By offering his own head and accepting himself for who he truly is, the curse is lifted. The idea of changing and wearing identities comes through elsewhere, in particular the second book. The parasitic mage steals identities. The Lord of Worms becomes human through eating flesh, and many, many other instances in the Glass Purgatory. Even the mad pricker shows a loss of identity through a mask. Ghylak's faithful are trying to find the right face, the right identity to lift the curse, but only the god's own visage will do that, and only when the god accepts his sins. But Ghylak's curse isn't the only one. Ketereth, the god of wrath and putrefaction, has their own curse: white hives. This terrible affliction covers one with the namesake hives, turning them into a living insect's nest. They will eventually be consumed. There is no known cure. It can be caught through stings, passed down from mother to child, or from receiving a ring blessed by Ketereth itself. Some do indeed see this as a dark blessing. The vengeful prince is one such figure, being born from a mother infected with white hives. The prince was sickly and weak his entire life, and it's likely he threw off his accursed flesh to become king of his own infested domain within the Glass Purgatory. Located in the ruins outside of Old Agarid, the Purgatory is a realm of illusions and curses. Its entrance is a secret behind a secret, and to enter the maze of mirrors is to risk innumerable painful deaths in one's own mind. The Purgatory itself is likely in the domain of Ketereth. There is a symbol that is associated with the dark god shown prominently, although it isn't said exactly which ruin the Wayfarer ventured into, so it may not have been the one known as Ketereth's fingers. We follow the Wayfarer as he travels through the Glass Purgatory, and much of the time he is fighting his own delusions made manifest. Many cursed and horrible creatures have made their home here, or perhaps it is better to say that they were imprisoned. The Purgatory is built around the primordial glass at its centre, the prison fracturing and reflecting outwards into endless mazes. The illusions themselves are layered. One may be mortally wounded or even escape the Purgatory, only to find themselves summoned back to the mirror they glimpsed this vision from. This sense of unreality is woven throughout the deepest, darkest places of Vermis. The Shade Sanctum, on the edge of the Flutewood Forest, stretches deep underground. It's here one can find the ring Ketereth's blessing, and this strange symbol that seems to be associated with the god. The Purgatory contains this symbol too, and that's not the only similarity. Both contain a garden much deeper underground than should be possible, and they both contain similar traps, like the Mirror Labyrinth and magically lengthening hallways. The darkness hides all kinds of monsters, waiting for one to travel too deep. The Pestilent Mines, only mentioned in passing in both books, is one such location. It's considered the birthplace of the curse, but it's not clear which curse or what exactly the curse does. The mines hide secrets of the old world buried deep under the earth, said to be better left alone. In the old world, it was used to mine a special material known as black iron, a perpetually cold metal. The miner knights hail from these caves, being born and raised in its disease-ridden burrows. There are even cursed artifacts. The most notable cursed artifact is the cursed blade of Ogle, a disgusting weapon wrapped in black hair and mouldy bandages. This blade is where the great ancient demon Ogle was sealed away. It whispers to its guardian, promising them strength, but anyone who wields or even sees the blade becomes terrified or worse, dying from fear. Ogle the great demon reminds us that all demons were gods once. It is man who puts crowns on our heads and holds axes over our necks. The difference between a god and a demon is merely a decapitation, a loss of identity. Today we've only scratched the surface of the books. There's a lot more to them than just this world building, especially in the second. They contain character classes, dungeon maps, artifacts, monsters, and more. I only included the things directly relevant to the lore and world building in this video, but the things I left out are fascinating in themselves. There are many tragic, exciting, and interesting moments. There's also deeper themes woven throughout the books. They're hard to capture, I tried to touch on some of my interpretations here, but frankly, no secondary media can ever cover it like experiencing the books themselves. If you enjoyed this video, then I implore you again to consider buying the books. This kind of content should be supported whenever possible. Thank you all very much for watching. This video was generously supported by the patrons, whose names you can see on screen now. If you'd like to support the channel, the Patreon is the best way to do that. You can get early previews of videos, scripts, and even see full videos a week before the general public. And, of course, you can get your name in the credits. Oh, and Vermis 1 and 2 are 5 out of 5 stars. Thank you for coming to my review. My name's Mauthe, and remember to ask yourself, whose flesh is your flesh?